My name's Dr. Sarah Ruggins, and I recently broke the world record for cycling from John O'Groats to Land's End and back to John O'Groats. The experience of breaking the world record in 3 words. Relentless, surprising, and overwhelming. So the last few days since finishing have been a little bit overwhelming. It's been a bit of a roller coaster physically and emotionally. When I finished, I was hardly able to walk, and so my crew literally carried me to bed to sleep. So when I was a young teenager, I excelled in track and field. So I set national records in many different distances, ran Commonwealth Games qualifying times, and was preparing a hopeful Olympic bid for my country. But I got sick when I was about 16 years old, and that kind of derailed my athletic plans. Complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS, is not a well-known disease, but it impacts your immune system and your nervous system, and it's been called one of the most painful diseases known to modern medicine. So unfortunately, it's a progressive disease if it's not caught early, and the way it materialized in me is it started in both of my feet after a simple operation for fractured metatarsals. And basically I lost the ability to move my toes, my ankles, and then it quickly progressed up to my legs. So I lost the ability to move any of the joints in my legs. It then progressed up to my arms. So I lost the movement of my arms and my hands, and then up to my face. And I lost all my hair and about 40% of my body weight. And alongside the immobilization that it causes very severe nerve pain. So it felt like you're experiencing 3rd-degree burns or broken bones when in fact you're not. So your nervous system is really thinking that your body is being attacked or being wounded when it's not. But I was in a wheelchair, fully immobile, and we were seen by a few different hospitals. So some used medical interventions, and others used just incredibly aggressive physiotherapy and occupational therapy to help me regain my fine motor skills, and then train my nervous system to understand what should hurt and what shouldn't hurt. So this process took about a year, I would say, until I was able to be out in the world more independently, but still using like assisted devices to help with my disability. But once I started running again, I realized that I quite enjoyed it. And so my runs became longer and longer. And I realized while I no longer have the speed and power that I did when I was young, my illness has given me a gift for endurance and mental fortitude and the ability to manage discomfort. And so that's when I really turned to endurance sport to try to see what I could accomplish. And the bicycle came into it because I have brittle bones now after my illness. So running no longer suited me. I broke so many bones and I needed so many operations. Trying to rebuild my fitness. So I turned to the bicycle because it was low impact about 2.5 years ago, and I haven't looked back since. So I had a friend who said we should apply for the Transcontinental Bike Race. I didn't know what it was. I didn't own a bicycle, but I said yes. To our luck, we got in. And so I had to buy a bike and learn how to ride it as an adult. So I had 5 months to prepare for my first Transcontinental race. And that was my journey into cycling. Yeah, I think what I learned in the Transcontinental, which is unsupported bikepacking racing, is I enjoyed that it would push you to your mental and physical limits. But what I didn't enjoy is all of the pit stops you would have to make. So you were your own mechanical support, you had to find your food and shelter. And it just sparked this idea in me, how far can I go if I'm not waylaid by anything? I really like the idea of time trialing, like the one waylay jog records, but I love the idea of extending those and bringing in more complexities like sleep and crew management. And so the idea for LeJogle, or what became JOGLEJOG in our case, was really born of those two things, is seeing how far I could go uninterrupted on a bike and how I could blend more intense time trialing with an endurance discipline. Yeah, relentless is again the one word I would probably use to describe the training. We did reverse periodization through the winter, so I was in the saddle less. I was probably around 14, 15 hours a week in the saddle and about 4 to 5 hours a week of strength training around that. And as we progressed out of the winter, about 3 months away from this attempt, we focused more on volume. So I was maxing out at about 28 hours a week in the saddle. And about 4 hours a week of strength training to complement that in the gym. I have a full-time job. This quickly became my second full-time job. And I'm grateful that I have very patient family and friends who realized that they probably wouldn't see me for about 6 months before this attempt. And what my days would look like is my alarm would usually go off around 3:30, 4 a.m. I'd be on the bike for 2 hours, go to the gym for an hour, work my 9 to 5, and then be on the bike for another 2 or 3 hours that evening. And it was like that 5 days a week. And then I would have 2 longer rides each weekend. Oh my gosh, yeah, the time in the lab was incredibly valuable. I think the most important pieces of information I got from your team was knowing how much sodium was in my sweat and then the volume of sweat that I would lose through that heat chamber. And what that really allowed us to do is through our nutrition plan, adapt the level and volume of electrolytes and fluids that I was taking on throughout the challenge. So I knew, for example, there were some days we were riding in 28 Celsius where I would need to up those electrolytes from the 1,000 milligram to 1,500. Just due to the heat, whereas there was times when we were going through Scotland, it was probably -4, where I knew I could actually drop that volume and that level of electrolytes because I wouldn't be sweating as much. But without that understanding that I got in the heat chamber and working with you guys, I would just be guessing. And when your body is so fragile and you're operating, it's such a fine balance. Knowledge is power, so that was indispensable. Yeah, so from the nutritional standpoint, it was a lot easier to prepare. So I did a lot of gut training with the carb products and with the electrolytes to try to understand, what the optimum level was for me. And I kind of found out that was about 90 grams an hour is what I could do comfortably, and then I would supplement that with real food. So yeah, just practicing using the products I was going to use in the event. And that took about 2 months, 3 months to kind of bed down. And so that was actually easy and really good practice. What we were looking at was about 750 mils every 2 hours in electrolytes. And then as and when I could, upping that by another 500 to 750 mils with some other form of fluid. We stayed pretty much on course with that, except when it was quite cold. But when it was cold, we tried to supplement it with warm drinks where we could. So the fluid intake and the electrolytes stayed pretty much to plan. Nutrition changed quite a bit throughout the course of the process. So we started predominantly with whole foods and using, carb supplements as supplementary to that. And it very quickly switched once my body became unable to tolerate the volume of food that I needed to be taking in, which was about 11,000 calories a day. I started off with the best of intentions. So we had lots of nuts and dried fruits because those are excellent sources of sugars and fats and carbohydrates. Quickly realized I wanted none of that. And we started off with a lot of rices and pastas, but made with really high calorie, like double cream and cheeses. And that worked for probably the first 48 hours. And then after that, I realized the volume of food I needed to take on was just so great that it wasn't feasible. So we switched predominantly to like nutritional shakes. And we just put in as many calories to those as we could. So we'd be like scooping in peanut butter or like extra carb mix or like whatever we could get into that liquid to try to up the calories and the carb intake. I used your 1,000 milligram electrolyte tabs. I used the carb drink mix. I don't know how many bags of that we went through, but there was a lot. And then the 30 gram carb chews as well. So basically my riding pattern was I would ride for 4 hours and then have one 10-minute pit stop. And it was like that 24 hours a day, except when I slept for an hour to an hour and a half through the night. So what that meant for carrying food is I needed to be eating throughout that 4 hours, but I couldn't be eating heavy meals or anything. So I used a Restrap 1.2 liter top tube bag. And what we did on every pit stop is my crew basically shoved it full of your carb chews, a lot of Mars bars, and whatever else I could eat at the time. So whether it was like stroop waffles or bagels or anything that I could tolerate. And they would send me on my way. And what we would do throughout the 4 hours is, as that got depleted, they would just do pass-offs to me as and when I needed extra nutrition or a snack. And then when we came into the 10-minute pit stops, that's when we would try to focus on getting real food in me. So things like porridges, heavy soups, things like that. So we describe them as pit stops because I said, I want you guys operating like an F1 team when we come in. So for example, in those 10 minutes, I needed to have the bike serviced. I needed a sports massage. I needed cognitive tests done. I needed to eat whole food and go to the bathroom. That's a lot to happen in 10 minutes, and also just take a break from being on the bike. And so it took about 6 months of practice sessions with my crew. Most of them are not cyclists. They're coming from other sports or other disciplines. And so, yeah, it was about once a month for 6 months. We would run through and dry run what that looked like. We would problem solve what we would do on the road if certain things happened and how people would react and who would be responsible. So we had an entire operating process from start to finish with the individuals that were on the road with me. So I tend to think about the words that will kind of carry me through, because I think of these events as almost moving meditations. So I like to have words that I can anchor on, that me and the crew can anchor on. So yeah, mine were focus, discipline, and gratitude. So focus for me really meant reminding myself what I'm trying to achieve. And I struggle to eat and drink enough in these challenges. And so really focusing on that was incredibly important because that was a means to success. And then discipline, people always ask me about my motivation. I don't think motivation comes into it, it's discipline. And so for us, it's about every minute on those 10-minute breaks, how can we optimize what we're doing? How can we ensure those 10-minute breaks don't turn into 11-minute breaks? And how can I, at every opportunity, remain disciplined on the bike to ensure that I'm as efficient as possible? And then gratitude is just, having gratitude that I have a crew with me who's incredible. I have a body that's capable, again, of doing these things, and I have the support of individuals who are wanting to see me win. So reminding that this is all a good thing, even though it's incredibly difficult. I actually fell asleep while riding my bike and crashed my bike into some nettles. So the crew had to kind of help me through that. They had to revive me, get me motivated to get back on the bike and keep moving. And while that was difficult for me, because I wasn't feeling great, it was 10 times more difficult for my crew because they cared about me and they were forcing me to do something I didn't want to do. But we had prepared for all of this in advance. And my crew captain told them, they said, Sarah's not going to thank you if you just let her sleep. She'll thank you if you get her on the bike and keep moving. And that's why I'm so grateful for the crew and for all the practice sessions we had, because during those difficult moments, they were actually able to come together and make decisions in my best interest so we could execute what we were trying to. The sleep deprivation is obviously a bit harder to train. I had experience from the transcontinental, so I knew that I could sleep 3 hours a night and that was sustainable. But because this was a supported event, I knew I wanted to push that more because I would have individuals who could help me. There was no real way to practice it, so we just had to take the leap and trust the crew to monitor that as it happened. But the way that you can train for sleep depth for longer events is, for example, I would go out on Friday night after work when you're already tired and I would do a 5-hour ride, and then I would sleep 3 hours, and then I would do a 6-hour ride, and then just a very easy ride on a Sunday. And so by doing that once or twice a month, you can start introducing what that feels like to your body. So when you're actually in the event, your body isn't completely shocked by it. It says, oh, I felt this before, I know what this is like. But it's in a safe way, not in a way that completely like degenerates, you know, your health and fitness. Yeah, so I don't remember the periods that were incredibly bad where I actually like fell asleep while riding, but I would say how it feels to operate with sleep deprivation is you're almost in a disassociated state. So you can almost see yourself doing the event. And I remember being incredibly calm and feeling like I was dreaming and nothing was really bothering me. But I remember also being slightly confused. So I didn't know where I was going or why I was riding my bike. And that's where communication was so important. So I had my crew in my ear just reminding me that you're okay, you're exactly where you need to be, you're not lost and we're with you. You just need to keep pedaling and we'll tell you when to turn. And just keeping things incredibly simple for me so I didn't have to make a decision and I knew I wasn't alone. There's two standout moments. So one was seeing everybody through Bristol on my way back up. Bristol, there was hundreds of people that came out and that was just such a mental and like emotional boost that me and the crew needed because we had such a difficult time the night before. So that was incredible. The second best moment was when all of the guys in the support crew and the media crew stripped down naked as a way to keep me laughing and motivated and awake. So they really, they went all out to try to keep me motivated. Yeah, it was the purest form of like flow state that I could ever imagine because the last 500 miles or so, I was in a constant headwind and I almost didn't feel it because I was just so locked in and so relaxed at the same time. It's amazing how your body can it understands what you're asking it to do after a certain point and it just relaxes right into it. So I felt like it was almost like a moving meditation. And most of the photos you'll see I have earphones in. I wasn't listening to anything. It was just silence for probably the last 3 days because I felt like I didn't need a distraction. It was like something it's something I'll never experience ever again. It was just this feeling of release, like every single element of stress that I've been carrying for the last year just kind of released in that moment. And I remember just like collapsing and my crew catching me and I was just sobbing because I said, oh my God, it's finally over. And I did exactly what I said I was going to do, even though it was like harder than I could have ever imagined.